I never thought I'd be the type of person to eavesdrop, but sometimes life forces you into situations you never imagined. I was walking past the living room last Tuesday evening when I heard my daughter Sarah's voice drifting through the partially open door. What I heard next would change everything between us forever. Mom's going to be so disappointed, but honestly, it'll be so much more relaxing without her there, Sarah was saying. My hand froze on the door frame. I mean, you know how she gets about everything. The constant questions about sunscreen, the early bedtimes, the way she fusses over every little detail. My son Mark's deeper voice responded, I know, but don't you feel a little bad? She's been talking about this beach trip for months. She even bought that new swimsuit. Look, Sarah continued, we can tell her the rental fell through at the last minute. She'll never know we found another place. Besides, this way we can actually enjoy ourselves. No hovering, no constant reminders about staying hydrated. No insisting we all eat dinner together every single night. I felt the blood drain from my face. They were talking about our family vacation to Myrtle Beach. The one we'd been planning since Christmas. The one I'd saved for, bought new clothes for, cleared my entire schedule for. The one that was supposed to celebrate Mark's recent promotion and Sarah's college graduation. My daughter-in-law Jessica chimed in. Plus, we can book that adults-only resort now. The one with the late-night pool parties and the beach bar. Eleanor would hate all that noise. Exactly, Mark agreed. And honestly, the way she's been lately, always wanting to be involved in everything, it's just exhausting. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so hard I was afraid they might hear it. These were my children. The children I'd raised alone after their father died when they were teenagers. The children I'd worked double shifts to put through college. The children I'd sacrificed my own dreams for time and time again. So we're all agreed? Sarah asked. We tell her tomorrow that the rental fell through, act disappointed. Maybe suggest we reschedule for later in the year? Which we'll never actually do, Jessica added with a laugh. Right, Mark said. I already made the new reservations under Jessica's name. We leave Friday morning just like we planned. Mom will never know. I stepped back from the door, my legs suddenly unsteady. At 68 years old, I thought I'd experienced every type of heartbreak life could offer. I was wrong. For 43 years I had been Eleanor Hartwell, devoted mother. I'd been Eleanor the widow who never remarried because she was too busy raising her children. Eleanor the woman who worked as a night shift nurse for 30 years so she could be available for every school play, every soccer game, every college visit. Eleanor who postponed her own dreams of traveling, of taking art classes, of maybe finding love again, because her children needed her. Now apparently I was Eleanor the burden. Eleanor the embarrassment. Eleanor who asked too many questions and cared too much about sunscreen. I made my way quietly to my bedroom, closing the door softly behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed. The same bed I'd slept in alone for over 20 years, and stared at my hands. These hands had changed countless diapers, packed thousands of lunches, worked overtime shifts to pay for music lessons and sports equipment and college tuition. These hands had held my children when they cried, applauded at their graduations, and just last month, helped Sarah move into her first apartment. And now those same children were planning to deceive me, to exclude me from what was supposed to be our celebration together. I opened my closet and looked at the new turquoise sundress hanging there. The first new dress I'd bought myself in 3 years. I'd chosen it specifically for our beach dinner reservations, imagining how happy I'd be sitting around a table with my family, watching the sunset over the ocean. I'd even splurged on a new pair of sandals to match. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction I'd had with my children over the past few months. Had I really been that overbearing? Yes, I asked about sunscreen. I was a nurse for 3 decades and I'd seen what skin cancer could do. Yes, I suggested we eat dinner together. Wasn't that what families did on vacation? Yes, I got excited about planning activities. Because I'd been looking forward to this trip more than I'd looked forward to anything in years. But apparently my excitement, my care, my love, it had all become too much. I had become too much. The next morning I was in the kitchen making coffee when Sarah arrived, right on schedule. She had that apologetic expression I recognized from her childhood. The one she wore when she'd broken something and was about to confess. Mom, she began, settling into her usual chair at my kitchen table, I have some really disappointing news about the trip. I turned to face her, coffee mug in hand, and waited. The rental fell through, she continued, her eyes not quite meeting mine. The owner called last night and said there was a plumbing issue. Major flooding. The whole place is uninhabitable. She was a good liar, I had to give her that. Her voice had just the right amount of disappointment, just the right touch of frustrated resignation. Oh no, I said quietly. That's terrible. I know how much you were looking forward to it, Sarah continued, reaching across to pat my hand. We all were. But maybe we can reschedule for later this year? Fall perhaps. Of course, dear, I replied, watching her face carefully. These things happen. The relief in her expression was subtle, but I caught it. She thought she'd gotten away with it. Well, she said, standing up, I should get going. Busy day at work. After she left, I sat in my kitchen for a long time thinking. For the first 43 years of my children's lives, I had been the reliable constant. Eleanor who would always be there, always be available, always put their needs first. Eleanor who could be counted on to understand, to forgive, to sacrifice. But maybe it was time for Eleanor to make her own plans. I had 2 days before their secret departure. 2 days to decide what kind of person I wanted to be from this point forward. I pulled out my laptop, the one Mark had patiently taught me to use a few years ago, and started researching. If my family could make secret vacation plans, then so could I. By noon, I had found exactly what I was looking for. The Island Sun Resort in Key West, Florida. Adults only, just like the place my children were sneaking off to. But this one was different. This one was elegant, sophisticated, designed for people who appreciated quiet luxury rather than pool parties. The kind of place I'd always dreamed of visiting but never thought I deserved. I called and spoke to a wonderful woman named Maria in reservations. I'm looking for a single room for this weekend, I told her. Something with an ocean view. We have a beautiful suite available, Maria said. It's got a private balcony overlooking the beach, and it includes access to our spa services. Would you like me to book it for you? Yes, I said, surprising myself with how decisive I sounded. Yes, I would. Wonderful. And will you be dining with us? Our restaurant has been featured in Southern Living magazine. I'd love that, I said, and I meant it. After I hung up, I booked a flight. Then I called my bank and transferred money from my savings account. Money I'd been setting aside for emergencies for years. Well, this felt like an emergency of sorts. An emergency of the soul. That evening, Mark stopped by just as I knew he would. He had that same apologetic expression Sarah had worn that morning. Hey, Mom, he said, settling into his father's old recliner. Sarah told you about the trip falling through? She did, I said, not looking up from my book. I'm really sorry. I know how excited you were. These things happen, I repeated. Maybe we can plan something for your birthday instead, he suggested. Take you out to that new Italian place you mentioned? That's very thoughtful, dear. He studied my face for a moment, and I could see him trying to figure out if I was upset. But I'd had decades of practice at hiding my feelings when necessary. Are you okay, Mom? Easy. I don't know, different somehow. I'm fine, Mark. Just tired. He left shortly after, and I could tell he was puzzled by my lack of disappointment. He'd expected tears, maybe some guilt-inducing comments about how much the trip had meant to me. Instead, he got calm acceptance. Because I had my own secret now. Thursday evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pampered myself. I took a long bath with the expensive bath salts Sarah had given me for Christmas, but that I'd been saving for a special occasion. I did my nails, something I usually considered frivolous. I even called my old friend Margaret, whom I hadn't spoken to in months. Eleanor, she exclaimed when she heard my voice. What a lovely surprise. Margaret, I'm going away for a few days, I told her. Could you possibly keep an eye on the house for me? Of course. Where are you going? Key West, I said, and just saying it out loud made me smile. By yourself? Good for you. It's about time you did something just for you. That phrase stuck with me. Something just for you. When was the last time I'd done something just for me? Friday morning arrived bright and clear. I was up early not because I had to be, but because I was excited. I hadn't felt excitement like this in years. The kind that makes your stomach flutter and your hands shake slightly as you pack. I'd chosen my outfits carefully. The turquoise sundress, of course, but also a white linen pantsuit I'd forgotten I owned, and a flowing coral dress that I'd bought years ago but never worn because I thought it was too young for me. Today, nothing felt too young for me. At 8 a.m., my taxi arrived. As we pulled out of my driveway, I saw Sarah's car turning into the neighborhood. She was probably coming to check on me, to make sure I was handling my disappointment okay. I slumped down in the seat until we'd passed her. The flight to Key West was my first solo flight in over 20 years. I sat by the window and watched the coastline unfold below me, feeling something I hadn't experienced in decades. Complete freedom. No one to check in with, no one's needs to consider but my own. Maria from reservations was waiting for me at the resort, just as she'd promised. She was a woman about my age, with silver hair and kind eyes. Mrs. Hartwell. Welcome to Island Sunday. I've upgraded you to our best suite, the sunset balcony. I thought you might enjoy the view. The room was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the turquoise waters of the Gulf of Mexico, and the private balcony was furnished with comfortable chairs and a small table perfect for morning coffee or evening wine. The spa is on the second floor, Maria continued, and our restaurant opens at 5 p.m. for dinner. Chef Roberto is preparing something special tonight, grouper with mango salsa. After Maria left, I stood on the balcony and breathed in the salt air. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt completely present in the moment. No worrying about anyone else's comfort, no mental lists of things I needed to do for other people. Just me, the ocean, and infinite possibility. I unpacked slowly, hanging my dresses in the spacious closet. Each piece looked different here, more vibrant somehow. The coral dress especially seemed to shimmer in the tropical light. At 2 p.m., I had my first spa appointment. A massage followed by a facial. The masseuse, a gentle woman named Carmen, commented on how tense my shoulders were. "You carry a lot of stress here," she said, working on a particularly tight knot. "When was the last time you did something just for yourself?" There was that phrase again. "I honestly can't remember," I admitted. "Well, you're doing it now," Carmen said. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying," I said, then laughed. "And wonderful." That evening, I dressed carefully in my coral dress and new sandals. The hotel restaurant was elegant but comfortable, with tables scattered across a deck overlooking the beach. I was seated at a small table for two, and the hostess asked if I was expecting someone. "No," I said. "Just me tonight." I ordered the grouper Maria had mentioned, along with a glass of wine, something else I never did. The food was exquisite, and I ate slowly, savoring every bite while watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Hope you're having a good evening, Mom. Love you." I stared at the message for a long moment. She was probably lounging by the pool at their resort, maybe feeling a tiny bit guilty about the lie they told me. I typed back. "Having a lovely evening. You too." It wasn't exactly a lie. After dinner, I walked along the beach, my sandals in my hand and my feet in the warm sand. Other couples and families strolled past me, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt centered, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Back in my room, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea and called Margaret. "How's your adventure going?" she asked immediately. "Margaret, I haven't felt this good in years," I told her honestly. I'd forgotten what it was like to make decisions based on what I wanted, not what everyone else needed. "What brought this on?" she asked gently. I told her everything about overhearing the conversation, about the lies, about how I'd spent so many years defining myself entirely through my role as a mother. "Oh, Eleanor," Margaret said when I finished, "I'm so sorry they hurt you like that. But I have to say, I'm proud of you for doing this." "I feel guilty," I admitted. "They think I'm at home probably moping. They have no idea I'm sitting on a balcony in Key West drinking tea and planning to get my toes done tomorrow." Margaret laughed. "Good for you. It's about time they learned that you're a person with your own life, not just their mother." Saturday morning, I woke up naturally at 7 a.m., refreshed in a way I hadn't felt in months. I made coffee in the small kitchenette and took it out to the balcony to watch the sunrise. The view was spectacular. The sky painted in shades of pink and gold, the water stretching endlessly toward the horizon. I had breakfast at a small cafe in town, then spent the morning browsing art galleries. I'd always loved art but rarely had time to really look at it, to let myself be moved by it. In one gallery, I found a watercolor painting of a beach scene that reminded me of my view from the balcony. It was expensive. More than I'd ever spent on something purely decorative for myself. I bought it anyway. The afternoon was for the spa again. This time a pedicure and a manicure in a soft pink shade that the technician said brought out the warmth in my eyes. I couldn't remember the last time someone had complimented my eyes. That evening, I wore my white linen pantsuit to dinner, and was seated at a table near the window. The restaurant was busier than the night before, filled with couples celebrating anniversaries and friends toasting vacations. Midway through my meal, I noticed a man at the bar glancing my way. He was probably close to my age, with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. When he caught me looking, he smiled and raised his wine glass slightly in my direction. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I couldn't remember the last time a man had noticed me, let alone smiled at me like that. After dinner, as I was walking through the lobby, he approached me. "Excuse me," he said, his voice gentle but confident. "I'm David Morrison. I couldn't help but notice you dining alone, and I wondered if you might like to join me for coffee on the terrace." My first instinct was to decline politely, to retreat to my room in safety. But then I thought about my children, probably at their own resort, enjoying their freedom while assuming I was at home feeling sorry for myself. "I'd like that," I said. "I'm Eleanor Hartwell." We talked for 2 hours. David was a widower from Atlanta, a retired literature professor who was taking his first solo vacation since his wife died 3 years ago. He was thoughtful and funny, and when he talked about his late wife, it was with love but not the desperate clinging to the past that I recognized in myself. "This is my first real trip alone too," I admitted. "It's scarier than I expected. But liberating too?" he asked. "Yes, very much so." When we parted ways that evening, he asked if I might like to have breakfast together the next morning. I said yes before my practical side could talk me out of it. Sunday morning, David and I met at the same cafe where I'd eaten alone the day before. Over coffee and key lime French toast, I found myself telling him about my children, about the overheard conversation, about how I discovered that my devotion to motherhood had somehow transformed me into someone they found burdensome. "They love you," David said thoughtfully, "but they've never learned to see you as a complete person. That's not entirely their fault. It sounds like you've worked very hard to be just mom to them." "I wanted to be a good mother," I said defensively. "And I'm sure you were. But Eleanor, you're allowed to be more than that. You're allowed to have interests and desires and dreams that have nothing to do with your children." "I'm 68 years old," I said. "Isn't it too late for dreams?" David laughed, and the sound was warm and encouraging. "Eleanor, I'm 71. I just learned to scuba dive last month. It's never too late." After breakfast, we walked through the hotel's gardens together. David was easy to talk to, and I found myself sharing things I hadn't told anyone in years. About how lonely I'd been, about the art classes I'd always wanted to take, about my dream of seeing Europe someday. "Why haven't you done those things?" he asked. Because I always felt like I needed to be available. In case my children needed me. In case there was an emergency. And how often have they actually needed you? For real emergencies. I thought about it honestly. Maybe twice in the last 5 years. "So you've put your entire life on hold for theoretical emergencies that rarely materialize?" Put that way, it sounded ridiculous, but it had felt so reasonable for so long. That afternoon, David and I went snorkeling together. I'd never done anything like it before, and I was nervous, but he was patient and encouraging. When I finally relaxed enough to really look around underwater, I was amazed by the beauty of the coral reef, the tropical fish swimming in brilliant schools around us. "You're a natural," David said when we surfaced. "Have you ever thought about taking a diving certification course?" I hadn't, but suddenly the idea seemed thrilling rather than impossible. Sunday evening was my last night at the resort. David and I had dinner together again, and afterward we walked on the beach under the stars. "I don't want to go home," I admitted. "Not because I don't love my life there, but because I'm afraid I'll slip back into being the person I was before this weekend." "Then don't," David said simply. Eleanor, you've discovered something important about yourself this weekend. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you to forget it. He walked me back to my room, and before he left, he handed me a small piece of paper with his phone number. I'd like to stay in touch if you're interested, he said. Maybe we could meet somewhere halfway between Atlanta and wherever you're from for another adventure sometime. I looked at the paper in my hand. It represented possibility, the chance for companionship, maybe even romance. Things I convinced myself I was too old for, too set in my ways for. I'd like that very much, I said. Monday morning came too quickly. I packed slowly, trying to hold on to the feeling of freedom and possibility I discovered over the weekend. The coral dress went back into my suitcase, but it looked different now. Not like something too young for me, but like something that belonged to the woman I was becoming. The flight home was bittersweet. I'd loved every moment of my solo adventure, but I was also ready to face whatever came next with my family. I took a taxi home from the airport, and as we pulled into my driveway, I saw Sarah's car parked outside my house. My stomach tightened slightly, but not with the old anxiety. I was curious to see how this conversation would go. Sarah was sitting on my front porch, looking genuinely worried. She jumped up when she saw me getting out of the taxi with my suitcase. "Mom, where have you been? I've been calling, and when you didn't answer I got scared. I even called Margaret, and she said you were away but wouldn't tell me where." I unlocked my front door and walked inside, Sarah following close behind. "I was in Key West," I said simply, setting down my suitcase. "Key West? Mom, what are you talking about? Why were you in Key West?" I turned to face her, and I could see the confusion and worry in her eyes. But underneath that, I could also see something else, the dawning realization that something had shifted. "I went on vacation," I said. "Since our family trip was canceled, I decided to take one on my own." Sarah's mouth opened and closed several times. But you've never. I mean, you don't do things like that." "Apparently I do now." "Mom, you're acting strange. Are you okay? Are you mad at us about something?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was 32 years old, successful, intelligent, and completely unprepared for the idea that her mother might be an independent person with her own desires and agency. "Sarah, sit down," I said gently. "We need to talk." She perched on the edge of my couch, still looking confused and worried. "I know about Myrtle Beach," I said quietly. The color drained from her face. "Mom, I don't know what you... I overheard you and Mark and Jessica planning your secret trip. I know the rental didn't fall through. I know you decided to exclude me because you find my presence burdensome." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she covered her face with her hands. "Oh God, Mom. I'm so sorry. We didn't mean for you to find out like that." "How did you mean for me to find out, Sarah? Or were you planning to keep lying to me indefinitely?" "We weren't trying to hurt you," she said, her voice muffled by her hands. We wanted to relax. And sometimes you can be a little intense about things." "Intense," I repeated. "Because I care about sunscreen and family dinners and spending time together." "Yes. No. I mean..." Sarah looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, you hover. You worry about everything. You ask a million questions. Sometimes it feels like we can't breathe." I sat down across from her, and for the first time in this conversation I felt calm. "Sarah, I've spent the last 43 years of my life defining myself entirely as your mother and Mark's mother. Everything I did, every decision I made was filtered through what you needed or wanted. I worked jobs I didn't like to pay for things you wanted. I gave up opportunities for myself to be available for you. I put my own dreams on hold because I thought that's what good mothers did." "Mom, let me finish. This weekend, for the first time in decades, I did something purely for myself. I stayed at a beautiful resort, I ate meals I chose, I met interesting people, I tried new things. And you know what I discovered? I'm actually quite good at being by myself. I'm more interesting than I gave myself credit for. And I deserve to have my own life." Sarah was crying harder now. "I'm so sorry, Mom. We should have included you. We were being selfish and cruel." "Yes, you were. But Sarah, that's not even the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that I raised you to see me as nothing more than a supporting character in your life. I never taught you that I was a complete person with my own needs and desires. That's not true. When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, Sarah? When was the last time you inquired about my interests beyond how they related to you and Mark? Sarah opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She couldn't think of a single example. I don't want you to feel guilty, I continued. I want you to understand that things are going to be different from now on. I'm not going to be available every time you call. I'm not going to drop everything to babysit or help with errands or provide emotional support on demand. I'm going to start living my own life. Are you? Are you saying you don't want to be our mom anymore? Sarah asked in a small voice. I'm saying I want to be more than just your mom. I want to be Eleanor who happens to have children, not just Sarah and Mark's mother who has no other identity. Just then Mark's car pulled into the driveway. A few minutes later, he came through the front door, took one look at Sarah's tear-streaked face and my calm expression, and immediately went into protective mode. What's wrong? What happened? He looked from Sarah to me. Mom, why does Sarah look like she's been crying? Because I told her I know about your secret vacation, I said matter-of-factly. Mark's face went through the same series of expressions Sarah's had: confusion, realization, guilt, and panic. Mom, we can explain. You don't need to explain, Mark. I understand perfectly. You wanted a vacation without your overbearing mother. So you lied to me and snuck off to Myrtle Beach. That's fine. But I want you both to understand that I took my own vacation to Key West, and it was wonderful. Mark sank into a chair. Key West? Mom, you hate traveling alone. You've never been anywhere by yourself. That's old Eleanor, I said. New Eleanor apparently loves traveling alone. New Eleanor also loves spa treatments, snorkeling, and having dinner with interesting men. Men? Both of my children said simultaneously. I smiled. His name is David, he's a retired literature professor from Atlanta, and we're planning to meet in Savannah next month for another adventure. The look on their faces was priceless. They were seeing me as a person, maybe for the first time in their adult lives. Mom, Sarah said carefully, are you having some kind of midlife crisis? I mean late-life crisis. I'm having a realization, I corrected. I've realized that I've been so focused on being the perfect mother that I forgot to be a complete person. And I've realized that my children, whom I love dearly, have grown accustomed to seeing me as a convenience rather than as someone deserving of consideration and respect. Mark leaned forward. That's not fair, Mom. We love you. I know you love me, Mark. But love isn't just a feeling. It's also actions. And your actions told me that you value my usefulness more than my company. That you see my care and concern as burdensome rather than loving. We didn't mean, Sarah started. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but you did. And more importantly, you showed me that I needed to make some changes in my life. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden I'd neglected while I was away. It needed attention, but it could wait. Everything could wait while I figured out who Eleanor was when she wasn't constantly focused on everyone else's needs. So what happens now? Mark asked quietly. I turned back to face my children. They both looked younger somehow, uncertain in a way I hadn't seen since they were teenagers. Now you both go home and think about what kind of relationship you want to have with me going forward. A relationship where I'm a real person with my own life. Not just a resource for you to draw on when convenient. Of course we want a relationship with you, Sarah said. Mom, you're our mother. Then start treating me like someone you actually want to spend time with. Not someone you feel obligated to include out of guilt. Mark stood up. Can we try again? Maybe plan another trip, but do it right this time. I considered this. Maybe, but not right away. I have some other plans to make first. I'm thinking about taking those art classes I've always wanted to try. And David mentioned a wonderful cooking school in Tuscany that offers programs for mature students. Tuscany. Sarah's voice was almost a whisper. Tuscany. I've always wanted to see Italy, and now I'm thinking, why not? I'm healthy, I have savings, and apparently I'm braver than I ever knew. My children exchanged a look that I couldn't quite interpret. Surprise, certainly. Maybe a little fear. But also something else. Was it respect? Mom, Mark said slowly, I think we owe you a massive apology. What we did was inexcusable. Yes, it was. But Mark, I don't want you to apologize your way back into the old dynamic. I want you to understand that the old dynamic is over. What do you mean? Sarah asked. I mean, I'm not going to be the mother who's always available, always accommodating, always putting herself last. I'm going to be the mother who has her own interests, her own schedule, her own relationships. If you want to spend time with me, you'll need to plan ahead and consider my schedule, just like you would with any other important person in your life. It was quiet for a long moment. Then Sarah said, We really messed up, didn't we? Yes, you did. But more importantly, I've realized that I enabled you to mess up by never setting appropriate boundaries or expectations. How do we fix this? Mark asked. You start by understanding that I'm not just here for your convenience. You start by showing genuine interest in my life. You start by considering my feelings before making plans that affect me. And you start by treating me with the same respect you'd show any other adult you care about. Sarah wiped her eyes. Are you going to forgive us? I looked at my children, these adults I'd raised, who were finally starting to see me as more than just their mother. I already have forgiven you, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. After they left, I sat alone in my living room for a long time. The house felt different somehow, not empty but peaceful. I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring, or wondering if one of my children needed something. I was just present in my own space, thinking about my own life. I called David that evening, and hearing his warm voice made me smile. Eleanor, how was the homecoming? Complicated, I said, and told him about the conversation with my children. That must have been difficult, he said when I finished. It was, but also liberating. I think for the first time in their lives, they're seeing me as a person rather than just a role. And how does that feel? Scary, I admitted. But good. Really good. I've been thinking about our Savannah plans, David said. There's a wonderful art gallery there that features local artists. And I found a cooking class that teaches traditional Southern cuisine with a modern twist. That sounds perfect, I said, and realized I meant it completely. Over the next few weeks, my relationship with my children slowly began to change. Instead of calling me daily to chat about whatever was on their minds, they started calling with specific purposes, to make plans, to ask how I was doing, to share actual news rather than just random thoughts. Sarah surprised me by asking about my art classes. I'd enrolled in a watercolor workshop, and when I mentioned it to her, she actually seemed interested in seeing my work. Mark called to ask about David, and when I told him about our plans to meet in Savannah, he didn't express concern about my safety, or suggest that I was moving too fast. Instead he said, "He sounds nice, Mom. I'm glad you're making new friends." The word friends made me smile. David and I had been talking every few days, sometimes for hours. He was becoming much more than a friend, but I appreciated that Mark was trying to respect my autonomy. 3 weeks after my return from Key West, Sarah called and asked if I'd like to have lunch. Just the two of us, no agenda, just to spend time together. I'd love that, I said. We met at a small cafe downtown, and for the first time in years, our conversation wasn't about her work stress or dating life or apartment hunting. Instead, she asked me about my art classes, about my friendship with David, about what I'd enjoyed most about Key West. "Mom," she said over coffee, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how we never asked about your dreams." Sarah. No, let me say this. You're right. I realized that I could tell you everything about my 5-year career plan, but I couldn't tell you a single thing you wanted to do for yourself. That's really awful. It's not awful, honey. It's just the dynamic we fell into. But it wasn't fair to you. So I want to ask now, what are your dreams, Mom? What do you want to do with this new phase of your life? I thought about it seriously. A month ago, I wouldn't have had an answer to that question. Now I had so many ideas I hardly knew where to start. I want to travel, I said. Really travel, not just weekend trips to see family. I want to take that cooking class in Italy. I want to get better at watercolor painting, maybe even try to sell some pieces. I want to learn to scuba dive properly. And I hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. And I want to see where things go with David. I want to experience romance again, if that's what develops between us. Sarah smiled, the first genuine, uncomplicated smile I'd seen from her since this all began. Those sound like wonderful dreams, Mom. And I want to support you in pursuing them, not just give lip service to the idea. What do you mean? I mean, if you want to go to Italy for 2 weeks, I won't guilt you about missing Mark's birthday party, or whatever other family obligation might come up. I mean, I'll ask about your art classes and actually want to see your paintings. I mean, I'll be happy for you if things work out with David, instead of worrying about how it affects me. It was such a simple thing, but it meant everything to me. Thank you, Sarah. That means more to me than you know. A month later, I met David in Savannah as planned. We spent 3 days exploring the city, taking that cooking class, visiting galleries, and talking about everything from books to travel to our hopes for the future. On our last evening, as we walked through one of Savannah's beautiful squares, he took my hand. "Eleanor, I have to tell you something," he said, stopping under a streetlight draped with Spanish moss. My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "I haven't felt this happy or this hopeful in years. You've reminded me that life isn't over just because we're older, that there are still adventures to be had and connections to be made." I squeezed his hand. "You've reminded me of the same thing. I'd like to keep exploring those possibilities together, if you're interested." I looked into his kind eyes and saw not just a man I was attracted to, but a true partner in this new chapter of my life. "I'm very interested," I said. When I got home from Savannah, I found a package waiting for me. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal with a note from Sarah. "For documenting all your new adventures. Love, Sarah." That evening, both of my children came over for dinner. Not because I'd asked them to, but because they wanted to hear about my trip. We sat around my kitchen table, and for the first time in memory, the conversation was as much about my life as theirs. "So are you and David officially dating now?" Mark asked with a grin. "We're officially exploring possibilities," I said, borrowing David's phrase. "Good for you, Mom," Sarah said. "You deserve to be happy." I am happy, I realized. Happier than I've been in years. As my children got ready to leave that night, Sarah hugged me a little tighter than usual. "Mom, I'm proud of you," she whispered. "For standing up for yourself, for going after what you want. You're kind of inspiring." After they left, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and Sarah's journal, trying to decide what to write first. So much had changed in just 2 months. I'd gone from being a woman whose entire identity was wrapped up in her role as a mother to being someone who had her own dreams, her own adventures, her own possibilities for love and growth. I thought about that overheard conversation that had started it all, my children planning to exclude me because they found me burdensome. At the time, it had felt like the most devastating thing I could imagine hearing. Now I was grateful for it. If I hadn't overheard them, I might have spent the rest of my life being the kind of mother who gave everything and expected nothing, who lived entirely through her children's experiences rather than creating her own. Instead, I was Eleanor Hartwell. Not just somebody's mother, but a woman with her own story to tell. I opened the journal to the first page and began to write. Today I am 68 years old, and my life is just beginning. 2 years later, I was sitting in a cafe in Florence, Italy, sketching the view from my window while I waited for David to return from his morning run. We'd been traveling together for 3 weeks, taking that cooking class I dreamed about, visiting museums and falling deeper in love with each other, and with the possibilities that life still held for us. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Hope you're having an amazing time in Italy. Can't wait to see your sketches. Mark and I are planning a surprise party for your 70th birthday next month. But don't worry, we're planning around your schedule this time. Love you." I smiled and showed the text to David when he returned, breathless and grinning from his run. "They really have learned to see you as a complete person, haven't they?" he observed. "Finally," I said. "It only took me planning a secret vacation and completely restructuring our relationship." "Best secret vacation ever planned," David said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. I looked out at the Italian countryside, then at my sketchbook filled with watercolors from our journey, then at David's face, warm with affection and adventure. My children had thought they were excluding me from a vacation. Instead, they'd given me the push I needed to reclaim my entire life. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals turn out to be the greatest gifts. Sometimes being left behind is actually the beginning of moving forward. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply decide that you matter too.